Yes. Yep, I will. Okay, we are live on YouTube, and let me record it locally. Record to the cloud and make host. All right, have a great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is the ad hoc subcommittee on handbook evaluation for May 8th, 2024 at 3 o'clock. And we will be having this meeting through Zoom. The meeting can be viewed live on the Medford Public Schools YouTube channel, as well as through Medford Community Media on your local cable channel 9, 8, 22 or Verizon 43, 45, and 47. The meeting will be recorded. Since the meeting will be held remotely, participants can log or call in using the following information. Interestingly, it says Zoom link. I don't have the actual URL. Let me see if I can.
I can read it off for you if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you, if you could read that out for me, since I don't have it.
Sure. So the meeting ID is 918-1075-7989, with the Zoom meeting link being MPS 02155-org.zoom.us/J/918177757, sorry, 989.
Thank you. Any questions or comments can be submitted to me, P Rousseau, PRUSEAU at medford.k12.ma.us. And of course, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. It's presently just us, but to submit any questions, you will need your first and last name, your Medford Street address, or if you're an employee, please indicate that, and your question or comment. The agenda for today is as approved by the committee on February 4th, 2024, item number 2024-8. Be it resolved that the Medford School Committee will establish an ad hoc subcommittee to establish a process and norms around annual handbook review per the resolution passed unanimously on 11/20/2024, which was item 2023-26. And if anybody isn't lost yet, I'm impressed. That one said, be it resolved that the subcommittee will establish at the February 5th school committee meeting, we're a little late, and will work to complete the process as close to the original deadline of April 1st, 2024 as reasonably possible. So I'm going to take the roll. Member Tapa,
Present.
Member Reinfeld,
Present.
Member Russo, present, 3 present. We have a quorum. You know, our charge is to draft a document, in other words, a policy about how we would like to proceed with our handbook reviews each year. And I did search other school systems and not surprisingly / not surprisingly, actually, I couldn't find anything. It's very interesting. So the law does require us to approve them each year. And my guess is some years we do it in Medford, some years we don't. I'm betting that a lot of school systems are in the same boat, but hopefully we can lay that down and end that. So I have a draft that I have been writing today that I will share.
Member Russo, is there any history that we need to know about how this has been done in the past, other than inconsistently in terms of timeline, where the administration this year we got a packet full of policies / draft policies with the final draft forthcoming?
Sure. So I do thank you, because while there's nobody watching right this moment, there might be somebody in YouTube, and certainly people might watch this later. So the way the intent is that school councils will draft a recommended update to the handbook, and then those will come to the school committee for approval, presumably in the spring for the following school year. I think that historically in Medford, I remember one time approving handbooks, or maybe 2 times in my 7 years. And it was sort of like, here are the handbooks, you have to approve them. Okay. They were, at that time, they were all very different handbooks. And obviously middle schools and high schools and elementary schools have different handbooks. But for all 4 elementary schools to have different handbooks was kind of, it wasn't just that they were formatted differently with different fonts and colors. There were actually some policy and content differences that could not be correct. Like, the Medford Public Schools, the school committee has a policy, and in some of the books it was the policy, and others it was something drafted long ago or by a principal or a superintendent. So the need to clean that up has been an ongoing process. Now, I will say that we are in much better place now than then. The elementary school handbooks, for the most part, are the same. Content-wise, I believe they're pretty much the same. I think one of them is still formatted very differently, but honestly, that is not a hill to die on.
I have a guess as to which one that is, but
We don't need to talk about that.
I mean,
But
I have it in front of me as well.
I know. But again, I do honestly feel like format and like some schools they're named after a person, others are named after a river. Like to have your handbooks look different, I could get behind that. But the content needs to comply with policy, law, regulations, etc. And that's sort of the point of this meeting, is to get a process in place. So when we review things, first of all, we know that all of the handbooks we've approved are in fact complying with that stuff. There's always more interesting things like, how does each school handle drop off in the morning and pick up? And, every school's got a different physical structure, so those would be different, but it's sort of the baseline stuff that we need to make sure we have, and that we are doing the approval that we're supposed to do. That's the number one most important thing, is that we are supposed to, by law, put our signature on these things. And so we're going to lay that out tonight, how we get there. So can you see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm drafting a different policy, which we're not here to discuss tonight, and it just happened to have it was a schedule timeline kind of a policy, which I'm not going to tell you about because of open meeting law. But I realized that it was sort of useful here. And so there's 3 phases in this that in my mind, obviously this is a dialogue between us. There's the initiation of the update process. And these are dates that I just sort of like walked back in my mind when I thought would make sense. I do expect the administration to have opinions on this, and we can change the dates, obviously, during the regular meeting. So in my mind, sometime between August 1st and September 30th, the process will begin, and this is to begin the handbook update for the following school year. So I have that the superintendent will create digital versions of each school handbook. I know using the word digital here is kind of annoying, but I just want to make sure we are clear. We are not talking about printing huge binders of paper that we're expecting to get anywhere. And so this is just a copy of this is the current handbook that will be in use this particular school year that this is happening. So I'm going to use dates. I'm just going to say during school year 2024, which began in 2023, this would be the current handbook we're using right now. So then the superintendent's office, and this is one thing where I'm not clear if maybe it's somebody else in her office or whatever, but that these copies, which I'm calling drafts, will be updated. Somebody in the office will go through them, looking at school committee policy that has changed within the last year, any district policy, and for the uninitiated. So school committees have a lot of authority over policy. The way the law is written is that if we do not actually say what our policy is, then the superintendent is the policy maker. Just anything the superintendent says goes as policy. I mean, obviously within the law. So that's why I've separated them out here, because there are plenty of things for which we may have a policy on, or we may make a statement about what we expect and want, but then there's lots of things we don't. Now, whether we should or not is unrelated to this conversation. But so then district policy is I didn't want to put superintendent because sometimes it actually ends up being the principal, or it could be at a departmental level of like a science policy. I mean, so I just put district. I do think the word district, it might be a better word, but I don't know what it is. But anyways, any of the changes that have to happen because of changing policies, laws, regulations, legal rulings, those need to just be put into the drafts by the central office. We don't want 7 or 8 schools running around trying to find out what legal rulings there were this year, what school committee policies changed. I mean, that's just silly. And so, and that would be school councils doing that. Those are just volunteers from the school. I don't think that's the right way to go. I mean, there's teachers too, but so a draft that incorporates all of that stuff will be created by the central office. A memorandum detailing each of those changes. Now, I don't think anybody here expects to include in the memorandum corrections to spelling and punctuation and, but each substantive change, there should be an explanation for what it is. And then a copy of the handbooks originally, which are the current operating handbooks, the draft one, the memorandum explaining the changes, and a copy of this policy will be sent to each school principal. So the Roberts will get their version of their handbook with the required things, and each of the schools will too. Each of the handbooks do not necessarily contain, the high school handbook may contain things that the elementary one does not, and vice versa. So, so this is the initiation of the process. I suspect administration will have some tweaks to this, and the point is it starts and within some reasonable time frame. And the most important things, in my personal opinion, are this memorandum of changes, so that we are not being asked at the end of this to read a whole manual from a school and just guess what changed from the previous year. It's an impossible task. So next, those things go over to the principal, the school councils, and I'm not outlining how school councils get created and all that other business. That's all, the schools have them already. They are expected to draft what I'm calling the recommended handbook. So they'll go through it. They'll have the document that includes all of the changes that had to happen. And these are not changes that the school council is expected to, I mean, they'll have opinions on. I mean, everybody has opinions, but these are not changes they're going to, if the superintendent makes an update because school committee changed a policy, the school council doesn't undo it. This is just, they can make all of the other changes that they want. And there are many changes school councils recommend. So they will go through the handbook. They will not be confused about why this language suddenly changed, because it will be in the memorandum explaining it. And they will generate what's called, John, go ahead.
Yeah, so quick question. So I guess it's more of like a point of clarification. Hold on. I'm assuming this is sort of the point, the school council's made up of like students, staff, faculty. Is this the point for them to kind of give their feedback on like, we're finding that this isn't working, or this, like, we've noticed this uptake in this and we need to do something about it? Like, is this the community's chance to sort of
Well,
get feedback into?
Not feedback. The school council is responsible for providing us
Okay.
that. It's, I mean, they may provide us, there's also this school council changes memorandum. So if they make a change, a substantive change, I'm really struggling with examples sometimes, but
Yeah.
if they make a substantive change, not regarding the laws and policies and regulation stuff, they make a change to the handbook, and
Let's say it's about arrival and dismissal.
sure, thank you. If it's not controversial, they're just going to say we've changed this, and the principal and everybody thinks this is going to work better, and that's one sentence, and everybody's happy. If there's anything more challenging, then I can certainly see dialogue going on there. But the goal here is also that the school councils don't have to come and stand before us as a school committee for hours and one night. That's not expected of them. It's also not reasonable. So
Because if they have a concern about a school committee policy, that would be raised outside of this process.
correct. I mean,
Right.
they can have a concern, but the policy change isn't going to happen in time for this.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess I'm more
Next.
thinking about when the users of the handbook can give feedback on what they're seeing like when that period would be essentially. And I wasn't sure if that was the time for it or not.
Yeah, I mean, the school councils, I think, are constantly in that mode, like all year long. And so, I've not been on a school council, but like I imagine that things are piling up. And then when it's time to start this work, they've got their pile of things that they need to work through. Um, and it's between them and well, the principal is part of the school council, I believe. But the listing is in the law, but I forgot it. Yeah, but so this is in every way divorced from school committee so far. So they'll create a memorandum as well that just explains their changes, not the required changes. And then they will send that recommended handbook and the memorandum to the superintendent for review and submission to us. I didn't put it in here that the superintendent may have opinions on it, but my thoughts on that are this. The superintendent and central administration staff are not 16, 25, 40 people. If a school council and a principal have all approved this, I can't foresee the central administration sitting down to review and decide whether they agree on everything. It's a universe of endless availability of time and resources that doesn't exist in most places, I'm sure. So anyway, so I just wanted to be like, superintendent gets it. The review is if the superintendent really even wants to review it, and getting it to us. Next up is our review. So I put a pretty big time frame here, but I did want to make sure it happens before we're in May. So for school committee members, and you both this is your first term, but May has many names in school committee council and school committee circles, because that is when we get 750 invitations to every performance at every grade, at every school, and every art show, and every presentation from the social studies and the humanities, and every single award ceremony. And May is both joyful and absolutely impossible for school committee members. So in my mind, thinking about all the other responsibilities we have, I want this thing to be out of the way before May hits, because I like May if we're able to just focus on the students and the successes of that school year. If we also have to fit in countless other meetings, which we do, but let's limit it if we can. So anyway, so that's the purpose of the timeline. So I put that the item on the agenda would be review and approval of school year, and then obviously the number handbooks. It'll be put on a regular school committee meeting. Digital copies of the handbook prior to changes, the recommended handbook, the mandatory changes memorandum, and the school council's changes memorandum will be in our packets. School committee will take action such as approval, amendments, or postpone approval to a subsequent meeting or subcommittee meeting. So, I can envision that like early on, the first year, maybe even first 2 years, we may be like, this takes a lot more time. But ideally, after we've done this, maybe even only 1 year, we'll be like, we'll all know to flip to the memorandum. We'll read the memorandum. We'll be like, oh, okay, well, that all makes sense. Both of the memorandums. And then we won't be going line by line through, dense handbooks from multiple schools. I mean, obviously people are free to do what they want with their time, but I think that obviously the first time you ever review a handbook, it's probably a good idea to read the whole thing. But considering most of the content doesn't change, it's not a very efficient use of anybody's time to read it again from scratch. So, but in the event that, like Title 9, is that the one that's got major changes that just happened? There will be lots of changes that will come into our handbooks. Um, we may, and how that language gets transmitted from the law, whether I think that's regulation, but how it gets transmitted from the regulation into language that the superintendent is putting into the manual, we may have a real interesting set of conversations that need to be happening. So that may be like we send that to a committee of the whole, or a subcommittee, just to discuss that specific piece, like how this really works in Medford or what we think. I mean, a lot of times we will have no choice. And I know that during the previous presidential administration, there were changes and we did not like them, but we also didn't have a decision. There was no decision making for us to do. So I just wanted to make sure we had it out, that at the end of this meeting, we will do one of these things to make sure we eventually do approve them.
And
So
would I be, so on, I don't know how you want to discuss this, but since we were just talking about this, phase 3, step 3, sounds like we're talking about approval of handbooks as a whole once all of the discrepancies. So if there's an item that needs discussion in subcommittee, that handbook is not approved, rather than everything approved except for this section.
correct.
Right. I think that's a cleaner way to do this.
Yeah, we only can approve the whole handbook.
Yeah.
We can amend it, but so is
Mhm.
there a better wording for that, you think?
I mean, I think it's just an added sentence around each handbook will be approved. Oh, and actually, let me ask, I assume we're approving handbooks one at a, can we approve one handbook at a time?
We can approve one at a time. We can just say they're all good and go. We can
Right,
say,
but to say,
Right.
Approved by the school committee will be per handbook.
Could we say singular complete approval, meaning it has to be complete, a complete approval of a singular handbook? Could that phrasing just before approval make sense? Or is there like some caveat?
I don't mind that, except in a lot of other districts, all the elementary schools have one handbook. And I think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, well, that was the question I asked on April 8th that sent us down a little spiral, and I just walked it back because it was late.
I guess I mean singular complete. By singular, I mean like this is the McGlynn handbook. This is the Brooks handbook. If we approve one of them, that is a singular complete approval.
Will be in whole.
Yeah, that's actually really, really good.
Because, both all of us as well as the future school committee members will be like, what did they mean? How do we do that? It's like, that's the whole purpose of this meeting, so we can stop
Right.
having this conversation.
Right.
All right.
Is there ever a scenario when we send a handbook back to a school saying, fix this? Or is that you are invited to this subcommittee meeting to discuss this handbook?
I think that the school council's approval of the handbook is procedural. There's no, that doesn't make it the handbook. So I don't think sending it back is a thing. We just can
Okay.
change want within the excluding the legal stuff. But being collaborative, I would certainly much rather us be like, let's invite them over to discuss this in a subcommittee rather than just whole cloth like tearing out something that they took pains to create.
Mhm.
That's not really ever something we want, unless in the weird situation where as a school council creates something and as a committee a majority of us disagree, and we could make such a change. I don't know that we've done that before, but again, we've also not approved in a meaningful way before. So
I mean, it seems to me the main thing, the role that school committee has here, or possibly the superintendent, I guess this is my question at the end of in at the end of phase 2 here, this point 3, the second part, or the first part of it, the school council will send the handbook and memorandum to the superintendent for review. Do we need to specify what that review entails? I mean, I guess it's just sign off, but maybe it's the question about in 1 and 2, because the only time the handbook becomes a problem, and I've certainly received questions from parents about this, is if they perceive that an enforcement of a policy, which is kind of what the handbook lays out, is in conflict with the policy itself. Who's doing that reconciliation? Presumably it's happening in 1 and
Well,
that's, or is
yeah.
that just what needs to happen in that first review, and then the memorandum of changes says we need to make sure that this section, I guess I think there are relevant sections of the handbook that relate to new policy, law, regulation, et cetera. And that's what the memorandum is meant to do, is to say, we changed we changed the discipline to match the new bullying policy.
Right.
Calling, or when the out of school suspension, when the suspensions policy changed, to say we changed the discipline section of our handbook to comply with this. Who checks
Right.
that?
Yeah, I mean, right. I think that so if we assume, for instance, that there's nothing, when the superintendent in the first section is making updates, let's say that the superintendent does not feel that there's any conflict in that particular school's manual, and that there's no update required. You know, the thing about school councils is they are volunteers, and they are and with anything where there's a volunteer, where you rely on volunteers, there's going to be the people who volunteer are interested. And why people are interested varies very greatly. You know, there may be people, you know, there could be a whole pile of people who are volunteering for school councils right now because they disagree with how we did discipline policies. And so when they draft language around that, they may interpret our policies in ways that, as a majority, the school committee does not see that is how we did it. So, you know, that's the thing about language. No matter how hard we try to be as precise and clear as we can be, there's honest interpretation involved. And then there's, of course, always, you know, not good faith interpretation involved. And so in my mind, if there's something going on in a handbook that is not a good faith interpretation of what we have in policy, well, then we would, you know, use our authority to make the change to the handbook. But I mean, my hope is that that's just not a regular occurrence or something we really need to worry about. I mean, I am grateful to these school councils that all this extra work that they're doing. And you know, it's some of our staff. So, but there's always going to be an opportunity for disagreement between the school council and the school committee. And, you know, even though the law lays out this whole process, it is our approval that is required. So in my mind, at least, I'm pretty sure that's the case. It is really up to us what they say. I think nobody writing the law was going to say school committees sit down and write school manuals every year. So that's, you know, I think that's the root of that. But, you know, again, like a superintendent could also read the changes and be like, that doesn't really comply with the intent of the policy. So,
but are we asking them to do that before they send it to us?
Yeah, I'm not asking them to do that.
Okay.
Because I think that's in a district where we had endless resources, and that might be a thing, but none of us believe that that's coming anytime soon. You know, I would be happy if the superintendent's office had the capacity to read all of these things and really confirm that they comply with all of our policies. But it's a huge undertaking. So I think that getting us through this the first time is the part that's going to be hard, because it's going to be more work for every single group involved. But I think that once we're through it once, it should be dramatically easier. Aside from the fact that like there'll be examples of what the memorandums should look like. People will perhaps number their sections of their handbooks so they can refer to them. There'll be page numbers everywhere. Some of those things just happen naturally when you have to start writing about another document in a document. And that won't be easy the first time. But again, like anything, like all policy, like, we go through this, we do it for a year and we're like, oh, that just stunk. What were we thinking? Let's change
Mhm.
it. Is, definitely happy to change it, happy to throw it all away if it turns out it was just not a good idea. But the most important thing to me is that we can approve a policy, these handbooks, and approve them knowing what we're approving.
Mhm.
That's, that's sort of the unfair thing. Like a Friday, we get 400 pages of handbooks. Like I'm a slow reader, but I think for fast readers to get through it by Monday is a challenge. And
No, the
so,
memorandums, I think, is perfect. You need to know what's changed. It's your track changes of the,
and I would love if we could just use track changes, but I don't want us to get into the specifics of the technology and then it also requires that school councils are all using Google, and then they don't necessarily have Google accounts with the district, and it just
Yeah.
goes wild from there. So.
right. So I think one thing that we do need the superintendent's office to do, unless this is us, but is to confirm consistency across elementary schools, right? If one elementary school makes a change to something that affects the other ones, or the two middle schools, like I might have missed it, but one of them seems to have a homework policy and the other doesn't. And that seems like a problem in equity for students, of making expectations clear. I might just have missed it in this as I flipped through this large binder that we got.
I like that. A new phase 3, superintendent. I'm just gonna put that as
I think it's
review.
just, what is the superintendent review? Because I do think, if you get a memorandum that says you need to change this to comply with that policy, and one school changes it in one way and another changes it in a different way, or is this first memorandum saying, no, this needs to change in this specific way? But,
Yeah, I mean, I think
or
when
to
there's,
say that all handbooks have the, I think there's a useful conversation to have. We don't have to have it this year, about should each elementary school should there be a Medford Elementary School's expectations and then school-specific procedures? Should there be one elementary school handbook with an addendum for the Roberts, for the Missatuck, for the McGlynn? But I do think there's some consistency that needs to happen. But it's a heck of a job for the first time through.
yeah, well, that's right. How does that, just making it number 4 instead of a whole other, um,
That makes sense.
Yes.
great. It's a really important point and one that has come up many times in my time as well. And handbooks, the recess, and homework. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are the three things I think we hear about: consistency on levels, consistency across schools, consistency between school policy, school protocol and official policy, and then consistency between what parents are told verbally in the moment and what's written down in one or another location.
Yeah.
So this process can't address all of that, but it can address the consistency across schools
Correct.
and
Yeah.
with alignment with official policy.
Right. And I think that you just said something that reminds me, like, we want to make sure also that this policy is, if all the handbooks were perfect today, we would want this to still be the policy and we don't have to like keep coming back and changing it. So, yeah. And that's why I like that consistency language. Which, the superintendent can, with this first phase, which I don't honestly know that happens at all right now. But if this first phase isn't happening and it begins to happen, and I don't mean the superintendent herself, but under her direction, but this cleanup of like inconsistent language can happen. She's going to create a draft to send to them, and if it's already corrected in there, kind of getting out ahead of it. But that's a process for between her and I think the principals and school councils. So
Um,
what else we got?
and I just wanted to double check that there were tables of contents and everything, which there aren't. Can we mandate any parts of handbooks that every handbook must have this section or,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
but I don't know if that's part of this policy.
Yeah, I think that might be a very that might be a resolution we should work on, is that we will draft a handbook schema, or whatever the right word would be. We do it for our agendas and for other things. We say like, this is the structure we want. And some handbooks, you open it up and they'll be like Mass General Law quoted. Like, I think most everybody can agree that no, if you want to include it, put it in an appendix, but in fact, maybe just don't put it at all and just say what the law number is, because exactly 2 people per year are going to read it.
Well,
But
I do know people are looking and saying, look, this says right here.
yeah, but it can be at the end, not, the
Absolutely at the end, but I don't.
ability of our handbooks, some of them is,
It's interesting because some of these have federal laws included. Some of these say we've included the policies we think are most relevant to elementary school students. I think nobody says here, go to this website, which who would want to, knowing that website where our policies live.
yes, no, that's
But
true. So yeah, and I think a nice addendum would be great, but some of them, it's very much like, welcome to this school. And then you see language on the Mass General Law website and you're just like, what does that even say? It's not welcoming, and I think that handbooks really do need to be welcoming. And I can't remember who was recently talking to about this, but they're like, you should open the handbook and read the first page and have a strong sense already of your expectations as a student. Like, it shouldn't be that you have to go 42 pages in, start to kind of grasp what's expected of you, because nobody reads the whole thing. But that's a different conversation, I think. Either for another policy or just for the councils to have themselves. I believe the high school principal is actually working on a whole new format for that one, so I haven't seen it or anything, but I'd be very interested.
well, and the one that they gave us has a bunch of yellow highlighting that says this is changing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Part of this is to prevent some of that from happening too. I think it's helpful when policy respects all of the people in the process as like people who have lives and other things to do. And when I got that binder that the rest of us got, it frankly just didn't feel very respectful. Like, really, we're going to go through this and know what's different this year from last year. And not to be unfair to anybody, but like the process as it's currently happening is not respectful of anybody's time. So.
I mean, I will say when it comes time for me to review, I like having it in hard copy.
Oh
But
yeah. I'm not saying we couldn't get hard copies.
Yeah.
I'm just, but do you want to read 4 elementary school handbooks when in fact much of it will be the same?
Yeah.
You're a fast reader though, I think.
Yeah, but and then I guess in phase 3 here, we haven't said, So it says the school committee will receive copies and we will approve it, amend it, or discuss further.
Right.
Does that mean everyone is reading every handbook? What's,
Well, honestly, that is sort of the expectation that everyone is reading every handbook. And in my mind, once we've done this once, everyone will just need to read the memorandums.
Mhm.
Um,
And
I-
is
I-
that, so is maybe is that, I guess, is that a separate question in terms of onboarding new members, is you should have the handbook so you know what's happening in the schools on paper.
Yeah, we have talked about onboarding of new members. I'm going to move, don't mind my my video going out because I need to plug in. But the onboarding of new members has been a topic, and actually I have a Google Doc with a very long list of things for new members. I did send some of the things out, but the reality is that there's too much. And so figuring out how to deal with that
Yeah.
is a problem. Um, it's too much. It's just, I mean, I would say it's an impossible list of things. And when you go to a school committee conference and when you go to the
Charting the course.
charting the course, there is I'm pretty sure it's a conversation that happened. I mean, I've been to several of them, but there's this whole concept of becoming an effective school committee member, and um it's can sound a bit snotty or snooty, and it's not meant that way. It's just that the depth and breadth of knowledge you need to bring all year long to every conversation and things that are changing is frankly staggering. And so what that means is like you're adding more each year you're in office. Nobody, I don't believe in, and I would doubt anybody who says otherwise. Nobody in the history of school committees has been elected and been effective immediately. Maybe on an issue for sure, but not like on the breadth of things that we are required to approve. Our list of presentations on our policy manual is several pages long. We're supposed to receive all of those each year, and all of us are supposed to understand and approve them. It takes you a while just to read the list. So I think that what we decide to include in onboarding, which I know are slightly off topic, is
Mhm.
is something we might want to have a subcommittee meeting on at some point, a different one.
Yeah.
Because how do you bring people up to speed so they are effective as quickly as possible? Because the truth is the whole committee benefits when the new members are effective as quickly as possible. We all do. It's not that you won't have to ask the questions for which everybody else in the room already knows the answer to. That's always going to happen. And that's fine. But there are some basic things, and I don't just mean Robert's rules and open meeting law, that um you kind of have to know, and there's nobody out there teaching them. They don't teach them at charting the course because every district's different.
Mhm.
So it's a really good question and a hard one to answer, in my opinion.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us quite so far off topic.
Yes,
So in terms of this policy, I think the staging is good. The dates seem reasonable to me. I'm
They-
sure the people carrying out phases 1 and 2
right. I mean,
have
there's
opinions on that.
correct. And I mean, our approval, by the way, I mean, I gave us February, March, and April, 3 months. If we get these handbooks and we get the memorandum, it's, we just do it in one weekend. We don't need 3 months. So if they say they need more time in certain sections of this process, we have it to give to them. We'll just cut some of our time down here. I just wanted it, I like going early and having them
Mhm.
tell us more time. Otherwise, the councils are meeting in March to start talking about the handbook. And
Yeah.
then, you know, and then we're approving handbooks the last week of June, at best, or just not doing it. So I don't know if this, October to January school council thing is reasonable at all. Again, I haven't been on a school council. I don't even know when they form. And I'm sure they form at different times with each school, and whether or not, if everybody's just coming over, if staying around for another year, then, oh, it's formed, we agreed, and we're just going to keep the same council versus a whole turnover. I think,
I mean, I only know about the Roberts because Mia said, oh, yes, I'm on this.
right.
Sorry, former member Mastone.
So, this is in my mind, this is a draft policy that if we report out of here positively, then the committee and the administration can respond to. And I will, if we do approve it tonight to go to the full committee, I will ask the superintendent, when I send her this document, to send it to principals for their feedback, to come to the committee, or to email all of us so we can bring our notes on how we might want to change it at the meeting. And again, it's a policy, so it would be, first reading, and then this is not what we would want to just waive the second reading. We want people to have a chance to let it soak in. But
Do we need to say in phase 1.1, the superintendent or their designee?
no. So
Or
that's
their designee within central administration? I mean, I think it needs to be clear that they're not designating it to.
yeah. So it always is or designee. The
Okay.
only time it is not or designee, we actually would say we'd have to specify that only the superintendent can do something.
Okay, so that is implied kind of across the board, because I know we've had things saying, well, we didn't mean that you should do it, we meant that your office should do it.
Right. And I think that's, part of that is that also the superintendent is the only person we actually we have authority over. So, yeah, but no, we don't have to say that. It's something that
Okay,
I
great.
very much wanted. For a while when I was writing policy, I always went or designee. And then I'm like, oh my God, it's like putting the words Medford in our school committee policy everywhere. I have to remind myself to go take the words Medford out. It's the Medford School Committee policy. It obviously we don't mean Belmont. We'll do this. And the length of this thing matters greatly. As someone who reads very, very slowly, you know, I'm very attuned to this becoming too verbose enough, but not. I mean, there's also this other conversation. We're off topic slightly here again, but like just saying the committee is actually sufficient. But whenever we're talking about things like this, where there's the school council,
Yeah.
That's when I decide we need to go verbose because, like with the school building committee, that you can't say the committee. Do you mean us, the school building committee? Do you mean the school committee?
No, I see that. That's.
But it's hard to find consistency because you'll end up with some policies where you're like, oh, you said school committee everywhere here. Well, but there was a reason.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
Can you just put this up on the screen so I can read everything? I think.
is it, can you not see it all? Let me.
There we go. It was, yep, that's great for me. No, I don't need where you, that magnification that you had before was great.
Oh, 125?
Yeah, I just needed it scrolled. Yep, I can see to the end of 3. I don't need to see the policy information section.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Sorry.
Thing I have to notice is just the typo on phase 3.2 mandatory.
Where did I, 3, 2, mandatory. What's wrong with that? Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, I Googled it just in case I didn't understand linguistics for a second, but
Well, member Intapa has been finding Dory.
yeah.
Mandatory.
Funny, I thought I copied it and I had mandatory here. Where's I paid for whatchamacallit thing that should find all my typos.
Google Docs does it automatically, I thought.
I thought so too, but I don't see it. I must have turned it off by accident.
Oops.
Anyway. I'm gonna have to look at that because I do rely on that.
Yeah, I mean the time frame seemed logistical to me. I appreciate the cushion to on our end of like, hey, if these things need to get moved back, ours is significant, so that way we're the ones who are kind of paid to do the work and can kind of speed things along if we have to. Um, but like in my experience of drafting policy and drafting dates. We did it with elections with our student council, and like it was like it looked great on paper. It was like this makes sense, and then they just executed the new constitution this year, and it was like, no, we need to do this a lot earlier. So it'll be something we live and learn that we can
Yeah,
change later. But
for sure.
logistically, having a month for initiation, 3
Because
months for
I'm right in thinking that, because the handbooks have to be final and approved for students to receive at the end of August when school starts, because I know they sign off.
yeah,
Well, I mean, yes, but again, we
No,
have
I
a
want I want this done by May 1st. May has been terrible, and with our very wise decision to bring the budgeting process forward, it compounds
yeah.
May.
right.
No, I think we
But I'm
and
not saying push budgeting back, because knowing
right,
all this early is great.
yeah.
Is there a disconnect? This is my pedantry on display here. That the digital versions being created in phase 1.1 is what becomes the draft digital handbooks
No,
in.
as I wrote it, I was like, how can I connect those things? And I'm hoping is like a better way to describe,
Mhm.
like to not use the word digital.
Okay.
And I'd like to assume that it's implied, but um,
I mean, what you're asking is for the superintendent to duplicate the current year's handbook and update that to create the upcoming year draft. The upcoming school year.
and then we get rid of digital. Oh, we'll leave that. Actually, I'll say the copies of the handbook. I'm not going to specify the format because some members prefer digital, some prefer paper, some prefer both. I'll leave that out of there because
Yeah. Okay, if the superintendent notices an inconsistency and makes an update, do then they need to have,
no.
is there a third memorandum? I don't want this many memorandums, but do we need to know that the
Oh, that's what.
superintendent updated the Brooks handbook to match the Roberts handbook?
Um,
Or do the superintendent have to go back to the school council and say, hi, for consistency reasons, I'm making this change.
how's that sound?
Mhm.
And I'm going to resist giving it a name because it's one that we may never see.
Yeah, no, it's good. I don't really have any further questions or comments.
Provide the memorandum to whom? To school committee and the school council, or, sorry. Yep, sounds good. Just remove the provide before create on the second line of number 4. Backseat typing.
Much better than finding out what I typed later was like, didn't make sense.
Mandatory.
Yeah.
I would call these mandatory changes, but
The mandatory
that'll
changes.
just confuse things. Do we then, we're in subcommittee, do we motion to send this to full committee?
Yeah, so we would make that,
Passing it by the administration first.
no, we would, so, let me stop sharing. Once I can find that, stop share, great. So, I had to move to my bedroom where my power cord is. So I'm not going to do that horrible thing where people have meetings from their bed. But, so I have too many windows open, sorry. So, the motion, the basic motion would be, to report out policy BC, whatever the policy ID was, I just had it in my face a second ago.
That's fine.
HC, CHCA dash B, CHCA dash B. To report policy. It's not positively, what's the word? Out to,
What comes after the word? I can figure out words in context, but I don't have
Well-
enough of it for this one.
yeah, so to report policy blah out to the full committee for
Adoption?
adoption with subcommittee, with unanimous, well, no, with subcommittee recommendation approval. Let me read it out loud. To report policy CHCA-B out to the full committee for adoption with subcommittee recommendation for approval. What was the other thing that we were just talking about that?
Getting the approval from the administration and or principals?
Right. A copy of the policy, the recommended policy will be sent to central administration and school principals, I'll just say principals, so they may provide feedback at the regular school committee meeting where the policy will be considered. How's that sound? Do you want me to read it one more time, or do y'all get that? I can read it one more time. I never like people
Second
voting.
reading, no.
So the motion, which one of you all would have to say so moved, to report policy CHCA-B out to the full committee for adoption with subcommittee recommendation for approval. A copy of the recommended policy will be sent to central administration and principals so they may provide feedback at the regular school committee meeting where the policy will be considered.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Right. So on the motion, Member Intapa,
Yes.
Member Reinfeld.
Yes.
So yes, in the affirmative, the draft policy is reported out. Thank you all for this wonderful work. I honestly don't look forward to having to actually do all this work on the first time through.
Yeah. Is that part of this conversation for this meeting, or is that the follow-on motion once this is reported out?
I don't honestly see this, we'll be doing any of this school year.
Thank you.
I really don't. I mean, nobody's gonna be able to draft any memorandums at the timeline we're in right now.
No, but I mean, do we just need to approve these as is once we get the
What we do this time around, I don't know. I mean, I think we may, in fact, if folks get time to read them all, somebody definitely should make an motion to approve them, but they have to be on the agenda for us to do that, and they aren't. So, it's fairly awkward for me to say out loud in a meeting, especially recorded, that maybe we end up don't doing the proper thing and approving them this year. Alas, we have also not done that for many years. So it's not like I'm suggesting we break the law and do something that's never been done before. Um, I I think that, yeah, we can talk, maybe you and I could talk offline about how we would want to do this, or you could talk to another member and say, like, so how do we get these approved? Do we want to approve them? Um,
Because the current policy is we don't have a policy, just they have to be approved.
correct,
Till this policy goes into effect, we are not breaking our own policy.
correct. That's correct. And looking around at other districts, all they have is that same language. They have to be approved. No comment about when. What happens if they don't? No comment about.
Is it too late to amend this policy to say this policy will be effective as of August 1st,
No.
2024?
It's not too late, but it's also not necessary because unless policy specific, and I don't know if this is the law, but this is definitely how everybody operates. Unless a policy says effective immediately, it is implied to begin the next school year, July 1.
Oh, I thought our rule said it's effective immediately unless indicated otherwise. I swear I read that somewhere.
Okay, well, let me take a peek.
Yeah, I've got the page open. I'm sorry, I know I'm dragging this out and nope, that's not it. Governance. I wish this tab could move.
Oh, you're right. Rule 46, the policy will take effect immediately unless otherwise another date is specified. However, I should point out that immediately, we're already past the end date of this implementation on this. So immediately does mean August 1st. We
Okay.
cannot go back to April.
I'm taking your word on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just making it up as I go, of course, but but since all these dates are now passed, I don't think we could reasonably think that we have to have done this.
No, that sounds about right to me. If it's
All right,
outside of the time we're dialoguing, but no, that does make sense to amend it. But right, if this was April 28th, we'd be having a different conversation. I think. But
Yeah.
the fact it's May 8th, I think we're okay.
That's my sense.
All right.
But I didn't even think about that member rifles. Thank you for bringing that up because that would have been fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like when we passed the policy on out of school suspensions, we actually passed it in December and did not have, we specified implementation for September 1 of the following year because we expected there to be substantial effort to be in compliance. So, but it's a really important question, is when does something start? And thanks for bringing it up and for reminding me that the policy I wrote, the rule I wrote, actually I had backwards in my head. So unless there's any other discussion, is there any?
I think my only question is, do we need to, when we bring this to the floor, do we need to talk about this year's handbooks?
I don't think we would do that because it's not
All right.
content it wouldn't be on the agenda.
Okay.
Um,
Or I guess maybe I'm asking if it needs to get added to the agenda.
Yeah, probably. But we have not received yet the 3 updated handbooks. So
we just got an email saying that we have them and that physical copies will be given to us.
okay, well,
And
timing, babe.
Yeah, no, like literally 20 minutes ago, we got the 3 of them, and we will be given hard copies up for the May 20th meeting.
Okay, good. So then, yeah, that seems like a really good time for us to get around to actually approving them.
All right, so, but that's not a motion of this subcommittee that we review handbooks for approval by the end of the school year.
No.
That's
I mean, it's outside the scope of our agenda.
of this meeting. All right, well, then I guess we didn't have that conversation.
Well, that's okay. We didn't make any decisions. So is there a
A
motion?
motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So move.
Second, or,
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm just
okay,
member and top
motion second. Oh, we're
Yes,
calling
yeah.
roll.
Reinfeldt.
Yes.
Member, so yes. Thank you all for a lovely and productive meeting, and have a good evening. And this meeting is adjourned.